friends. I'm your host, Erin Port, and welcome to the Simple Purposeful Living podcast. Life can be overwhelming and busy, so once a week, I invite you to join me, and together we will make simple tweaks to uncomplicate the hard parts of our life so we can spend more time doing what we love. Welcome back to the Simple Purposeful Living podcast. I am so excited today to have Carly Hill, debt-free mom, on with me today because a couple of weeks ago, I asked you guys to ask me anything, and so many of you, in response to me sharing my Every Dollar app usage, you wanted to know how we do budgeting, how we do personal finance, all of those things, and I am not an expert, but I knew one, so I'm so excited to have Carly on here today. She's got a lot going on. They're in the process of moving. She's a mom, she's a wife, and she's an entrepreneur. Welcome to the show, Carly.
Thanks, Erin. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited. So tell me a little bit about how you got started with this, what you're passionate about, and what you help women do online.
Sure. So I am a mom of four. My kids are between 4 and almost 10. And when I first had kids, I really wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And I knew for a fact that our financial situation was what was holding me back, that my husband wanted me to be a stay-at-home mom. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. It was the debt we had, the lack of savings, and our lower income. We were in our early 20s that was stopping me from achieving that goal that I really wanted. So I started to really think about, what do I need to change about my finances in order to make something that is a true goal of mine a possibility. And so the things that I wanted to work on were to pay down the debt we had. We each had student loans, and then we also had a car loan, to build up my savings so that I wasn't so vulnerable to any unexpected expense that came up, causing me to need to take on debt simply because I didn't have money in savings. And then also to work on increasing our income so that we had a solid gap between our income and expenses and could write out those little things that just pop up. And the more kids you have, the more things pop up that you didn't expect. So those were the things that we really worked on for several years. It's not something that happens overnight. From the time that I had my first child to the time that I actually became a stay-at-home mom was a little over 4 years. And we were diligently working on our finances. We weren't just posting. We weren't taking on new cars. We were working hard to create a gap and achieve those goals. I'm a teacher by trade, and more specifically a special education teacher. So my background and my training was actually, as I've grown out of that career and into a new one, what I've realized is that I was taught how to take a topic that is really important to someone, that they really need to learn for life skills, for success in the future, and figure out an unconventional, non-traditional, tailored to them way to teach them that skill. And so that's what I was trained to do. And now I carry that out of special ed and into what I do now, which is running this business, Debt-Free Mom. And so what I do is I recognize that taking care of our personal finances and managing our money well is an essential skill for everyone, but it's also a highly frustrating skill. And so I use my training as someone who looks at what I call it like a student, or looks at a follower or an audience member and says, okay, this is really valuable to their life, but they're also really frustrated, scared, embarrassed, overwhelmed. So what can I do to take this topic and make it motivational, make it something that they're excited about, that they want to talk about. And so that's what I do in Debt-Free Mom is I'm primarily on Instagram. I also have podcasts and YouTube and newsletter. And that's my whole goal, is to just bring positivity and motivation to a topic that seems so taboo and overwhelming, so that we can talk about it and make changes, like the change that I wanted to make of being a stay-at-home mom. But whatever change or goal they have, that's the thing I want to help them achieve.
I love, first of all, I'm a former teacher, and I love that you said when I grew out of that job into this job, I was like, I love that. That's such a good way to approach it. And I have that teacher lens too, where I'm constantly thinking like, okay, how can I convey this information so that people understand it. And I love that you bring that background to the situation. And it's hard. It can be so shameful for people. Money can be. And I think for a lot of people, we weren't necessarily taught how to handle money well. I think of that even with my own kids now, of like, what are some opportunities where I can give them a chance to maybe fail? I call it failing cheaply, where they can feel the repercussions of some of those things. Like I had some of that with my parents. Like I had a credit card in college and they were like, I got a little too happy with it, right? Because it's
Mhm.
easy to do.
Mhm.
And they were like, you're going to have to pay that off. And that was painful, right? But I'm
Mhm.
thankful for having that opportunity when I was younger, where the stakes were a little bit lower than now, now here. But I love that what you're doing
Yeah.
is bringing awareness and you make it so accessible. And that's one of the things I love is because I'm big on tiny tweaks because finance, budgeting, it can feel so overwhelming, just like decluttering or organizing. People are like, it's too much. I'm not even going to start. So I
Mhm.
like to break it down into smaller pieces for people so that they can start. And so what is the hardest part, would you say? Like we know it's starting, but what's one
Mhm.
super small step a busy, overwhelmed woman could take today to begin budgeting or taking control of her finances?
Yeah, so I think where people often miss the mark when they start is that they come to a point, whether it's they log into their bank account and see the number, or they get that credit card statement and it's bigger, or they thought they'd be able to do something by a certain age and they're not able to do that thing. There's some moment there's some turning moment where they're like, I've got to do something differently. But what the main thing we skip over is that we either think, okay, I need to start putting money in savings or I need to pay down debt. And we just start kind of throwing money in those directions
Mm.
pretty haphazardly. And when we don't have a way to accurately plan out what we're going to do with our money in advance, sometimes those really good goals, like saving or paying down debt, can actually come back to bite us because we're using money that we actually need for other bills or expenses and trying to send it to a goal, but we're just creating a little bit of a problem down the road. So the thing that I actually tell people to do is don't jump into putting money in savings or paying down debt. Take like 3 months, take a quarter of a year to just plan your money. So that word is budget. A lot of people hate that word. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to do it. So what I tell people is a calendar is a budget for our time
Mm.
because our time is a limited resource. We don't have infinite time. When we choose to do one thing with our time, it means we're saying no to something else.
Mhm.
So we know we naturally recognize that we want to be really efficient with our time because it's limited. So we use calendars and we use reminders and we map it out. We might have a monthly calendar on our wall and then we look at a daily calendar on our phone because we know that that resource is limited. And money is exactly the same way. Our money is finite. It doesn't have an infinite. I can't choose infinite things. If I say yes to one thing with my money, I'm saying no to something else. So a budget is simply a plan for that finite resource so that we're as efficient with it as possible. And that, a lot of times when you hear about things like your time, people will say, your calendar is a reflection of your priorities. And a budget is exactly the same way with our money. And we can't be spontaneous and just off the cuff and be like, it'll all kind of work out. It just doesn't happen that way. If I decided to scrap my calendar, my time would be a mess and it would not reflect my priorities. And so having a plan for our money in advance where we actually sit down, where we're not, stressed and trying to catch up and be like, oh my goodness, how do I make it to the end of the month? Find a time like the beginning of the month or your payday to sit down and say, what do I really want out of my money? What do I want to achieve? What are the things that I'm trying to accomplish? Am I trying to have more options for where I work or how often I work? Am I trying to increase how many vacations I can take with my kids? What is really my goal? And then is that reflected in what I'm currently doing with my money? So creating a plan. Another thing that is often confusing about a budget is that people think that if I make a budget, it means I automatically have to spend less than I currently am. So
Mm.
that if I write things down, it means I have to cut anything fun. I have to stop eating out. Your budget can include whatever you want in whatever amount you want. It's simply a plan. So a budget could have $600 a month in eating out if that fits in your budget. A budget could have you get $200 of spending money a month. So it's simply a plan for what we want to do. And it has no rules about what can or can't be in there in whatever amount. So that's the starting place, is to sit down and say, this budget can have whatever I want to have in it if it fits into our income and our goals. And so I don't need to make changes. So I don't need to say, okay, simply because I'm making a budget means that I have to stop doing this thing I enjoy. Please, I want you to put the thing you enjoy into the budget.
And I think one of the things well, you had me at planning and time because I'm a huge proponent of that, right? And I always tell people when you plan out your week, it's not so rigid that it can't flex with changes and ebbs, right? And
Mhm,
it's the same with our money,
mhm,
right? Our budget is gonna flex and ebb. And that's what I found as we've been budgeting now for a solid year consistently, which it's always been the bane of our existence. And I'll get to why that
mhm,
has finally worked for us. But we have tweaked it as we've gone. Like last Christmas, we didn't have a budget or a category for Christmas. So all Christmas long, I was super stressed about spending because there wasn't a category and I was constantly going over in the miscellaneous category. So what we did this year is okay, now we have a Christmas category and we're just accumulating in the budget, like we're
mhm,
not touching it so that when Christmas comes around, I can put stuff, I can buy stuff with freedom. And that's what I have found with
mhm,
budgeting. And I'm kind of jumping to the next question a little bit. But the reason we finally started budgeting was because I had so much anxiety. I'm the primary spender in the family. I'm guessing a lot of people
mhm,
are that way. Women tend to be just because we're getting the groceries, we're buying the clothes for the
mhm,
kids, all that kind of
mhm,
stuff. And I was constantly in a state of stress anytime I would go to the store to buy things. I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know if we have the money. And that unawareness, I don't know if that's a word, an unawareness
mhm,
caused a spike in my anxiety. So my husband and I finally sat down and I said, hey, Scott, like, this is causing me a lot of anxiety. I think if I knew how much money I had to spend, I would have less anxiety. Well, sure enough, the next
mhm,
month it was like a change of the seasons. Of course, my kids are growing like weeds. We have four too.
mhm,
They needed new pants. And so I went to the store and it was the craziest. I'll never forget it. I went to the store, I bought the items, I put it in the budgeting app, and I had no anxiety. It was like I knew
mhm,
that money was always there, but now I knew how much and I knew I could spend it with ease, right? And that awareness is our superpower. I tell people all the time, like, ignorance is not bliss. The
yep,
more that we
yep,
can understand, the better because then we can make changes and we can shift. So I love this. I love
mhm.
this. And it's money. Who thought
Yes.
I'd be so excited?
I'm so excited.
So when you talk about, okay, so I kind of stole your thunder a little bit with our story, but and that kind of gets to the next couple of questions because that's how Scott and I got on the same page was like, hey, this is bothering me. And he was never worried. Like he's like, we have enough money. I'm like, I know, but
Mhm,
I don't know that. And I'm the primary spender.
mhm,
But you talk
mhm.
about budgets that thrive. What does that mean, and how is it different from budgets that feel like a punishment or diet? Because that's how I felt before I had that recollection of like, oh my gosh, this is actually better.
Yep. So if a budget feels like a parent to you that is
Mhm.
bossing you around, telling you what to do, and punishing you when you make a wrong choice, it's not a proper budget because you are the controller of the budget. So if the budget doesn't work for you, you are the one that can change the budget. So if it feels like an authoritarian figure that's telling you what to do and sucking all the fun out of your life, something needs to change about that budget because a budget that thrives does exactly what you just described buying clothes for your kids. Is a budget that thrives is something that has taken a weight off of your shoulders, not put a weight onto your shoulders. So what that looks like is having, like you said, having money for your bills and expenses, even if you already knew that the money would be there, having a plan for it takes away the feeling of like what you said, if I buy this, what am I taking away from? Like,
Mhm.
I might technically have the money in my checking account if I log in, but I don't have a good pulse on
Mhm.
what bills are coming out tomorrow that I might, today might be fine, but then tomorrow I log in and I regret what I bought today because I actually needed that money for a different bill. So a budget can take off that burden of keeping all of those mental notes and keeping track in your mind of, oh, tomorrow is when the car payment comes out. So I better not buy anything today. And
Mhm.
then, we get paid 5 days from now. So I need to wait until then. Having a budget is just taking all of that information that a lot of us, that's another thing moms do is carry that mental load.
Mhm.
A lot of us already have a lot of the information in our minds. And then a budget is just putting it on some sort of external paper, app, spreadsheet, whatever it is. So we don't have to hold it. We can let go of it. And we can say, I can reference my budget before I go shopping and say, oh, yeah, in this pay period, I set aside $80 for kids' clothes. So if I go to Old Navy and I spend $75, I'm actually making a little bit of money available in the budget compared to what was already there,
Mhm.
where the same exact shopping experience could be highly stressful because you just don't know. So I completely agree. I say the same thing, that ignorance is not bliss. And another thing I often say is that we can't solve problems we can't see. So
Amen.
if we're trying to comfort ourselves and say, okay, money is so overwhelming that I'm not going to look.
Mhm.
I don't want to log into that because it's overwhelming to me. You've now created a problem simply because you're not looking at it. Like that is the problem. The money is probably not the problem. The budget is probably not the problem. Ignoring it probably is the problem. So a budget that thrives is something that we actually want to look at because it's helping us. Because we say, hey, if I reference that budget, then when I go and spend, I'm not worried about taking money from the electric bill to buy that thing because in my budget, I can see that the electric bill is there and the shopping money is there. So a budget that thrives will have all of your normal expenses, but a lot of times when people try to make a budget, they stop there. They make a list of bills and they say, if my income minus my bills leaves me with a positive number, that's all I need to do. And
Mhm.
I'll just spend that number that's left. Well, if we don't keep track of that, I'm a math minded person, but I'm also a spender. And if I'm like, oh yeah, my $40 at Walmart and my $20 at Chick-fil-A, there's no way it adds up to that little extra I had left. And month after month after month, it does add up to that and more. So having that budget where I say, oh, I can just reference what's available in that category and decide to wait a couple days and buy it when that is available, it creates this peace about your money that feels like you have breathing room where you used to feel so heavy.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's what I will say I have found, and it's so helpful because I can just look at it really quickly, but 30 days or a month is actually a really long time. So those $20 do add up. And here's the other thing, when we are aware, we can be more intentional with whether it's our time or our money. We can make those decisions like, is it worth it? Is it worth it? For us, like, is it worth it to go to the fast food lane tonight? Or can I just grab a frozen pizza? And we can start to make those decisions because of that awareness, which then helps propel us forward. And then I love too, like thinking about budgeting as we've done it over the year, like it's imperfect, right? We kind of started that way with like bills and expenses. And it was like, oh my gosh, our miscellaneous budget is like ginormous. It's like,
Huge.
okay,
Yeah.
what are we spent? Oh, like kids' activities, Christmas, gifts, clothing. And we kind of started to tweak it out as we worked through. So it didn't have to be perfect. We kind of just kept tweaking it so that it got better and more work and working for us. And so I think just like that permission slip to start and then know like next month, okay, and then like you said, where your money goes is where your priorities go. And like for us, travel is really important. And so people will always say like, "Oh my gosh, how are you able to travel?" Well, eating out
Mhm.
is not as important to us. We do a lot of eating at home.
Mhm.
We live in a small town, so it's not always very accessible. So our eating out budget is very small. My gift budget is
Mhm.
very small because we prioritize travel
Mhm.
as gifts. So, but you
Mhm.
can make those priority shifts. Yeah,
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah, one of the things I do when I help someone build a budget is we set up the budget and they naturally, like I said, they want to, if they added together everything they spent at the restaurants last month, when we're building a budget, they're like, all right, cut that in half and
Yes.
like take that
Yes.
out. And I'm like, those changes that are so dramatic are not going to be
Yes.
sustainable. You might be able to do that for 1 month. You're not going to be able to carry that into the long term. So what I actually am, a lot of times I think people come to the meeting or come to building a budget thinking, oh, she's going to tell me get rid of X, Y, and Z. I actually spend most of my time telling them to add something to the budget that they didn't put in or to increase something that they were trying to decrease because I want it to be slow, steady,
Mhm.
sustainable changes. And I would much rather have them be making a plan for their money and tracking and paying attention to how that plan goes with all the identical spending they had been doing than try to dramatically slice all their spending in half in 1 month. And I know that I'll be talking to that person in 2 months saying like, oh, well, we tried it for a month and it just didn't
Yep.
work or whatever. So those are the things that like as we go over time, I think the more you become in tune or aware, the more you actually want to make those changes versus trying to force yourself to make those changes right from the beginning.
hmm And it's as if like what I talk about, tiny tweaks, is true. Like,
It works.
right? Like small habits over time build momentum. And that's what I always try to tell
Mhm.
people. Like, don't overhaul your life. It is a recipe for disaster and defeat. Like, you're just going to
Yep.
end up right back where you started or worse off. Whereas if you just do little bits of change, I love that. I love that. It's sustainable. Um, okay, so we talked about a little bit about how my husband and I had to get on the same page. And that was one of the
Mhm.
questions somebody submitted is like, hey, I'd like to do this, but how do I get my husband to kind of buy in or my spouse to buy in? What would your suggestion be there?
Mhm. So it's maybe not the answer that someone who is the budgeter would be looking for when they have a spouse that's not on board. Every person has a totally unique set of things that motivate them. And it's totally normal for your spouse to be motivated by completely different things than you are. So, what I find is often happening is that the person who is the money manager or who has decided that they want a budget has a very specific set of motivations, whether it's not feeling stressed, whether it's going on a trip, or like I said, maybe wanting to reduce work hours or change something up about their career. And they're trying to impose or superimpose those same
Mm,
motivations onto their spouse of like, oh, well, if I just tell him that I want to do X, Y, and Z, it will convince him to budget because that's what's convincing me to budget. But every single adult, whether they're married or not, just take two individuals, they're going to be motivated by different things. They're going to have totally different experiences with money, childhoods with money they're bringing to the table. And so they're just not going to be motivated by the same things. So, what we want to do instead is to learn about our partner's view of money, to learn what our spouse is motivated by, what they're afraid of about money. And it's going to be totally different than ours. So, what I say is that every single adult, even if we are budgeting together, needs independence and incentive worked into the budget. So, what that looks like for independence is some it can be like a token amount of money, like $50 a month, but some amount that just belongs to each person, that they don't have to ask permission. They don't have to explain why they're buying something. It's like, if I want to buy this and it's in we call it fun money, or when my husband and I first started using it, it was because we were having these disagreements on money because he's not a spender at all. He'll go months and months and months without buying anything. But then when he buys something, it's very expensive. And
mm,
I was the total opposite, where I was just buying little things here and there. So I was like, oh, well, this is not a problem because it's
mm,
$5, $10, $12, but it was adding up to a lot. And so both of us were upset at the other because I was like, well, I would never buy something for $200, but he had gone 6 months without buying anything. And then from his perspective, I was constantly buying.
mm,
So when we added it to our budget, this independence, we called it our no questions asked money.
mm,
And we said, like, out of everything in the budget, like 95% of the budget, we are mutually agreeing on and we're discussing together and we're coming up with our family priorities and making sure those are represented in the budget. But this small slice of the budget is just a way for each person to see something they like and just buy it and
mm,
not have to feel like, oh, well, he's going to be really disappointed if he comes home and sees that I bought this, or she's going to be super angry if there's another tool in the garage tomorrow or whatever. And so the no questions asked money was like, hey, the vast majority of the time we are working together on this. We're committed on this. We're communicating, but we each get to have a little bit of fun where we don't have to try to justify what we did. So that's the independence piece, is that if that's not represented in the budget, there's going to be problems, especially if the person who is not on board feels like the budget that's being created is stripping away everything fun. So if you come to your spouse and you say, we need to budget, our money is a mess, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do this, all they hear is, well, budgets are terrible. Why would I want to do that? I wouldn't want to do that. So if we instead build independence and incentive into the budget, so that independence piece where we say, hey, you know how we've fought before about what each of us are buying and we don't like that was a purchase that we didn't agree to? I'm adding into the budget a specific amount for each of us that you get to spend however you would like. You can let it build up for months and months and months. You can spend it tomorrow, but that's yours. And then the other piece is incentive. And what that means is that recognizing that everyone will be motivated by different things and building that into the budget. So There's two main incentives. And again, this is a very teachery thing, but people can be internally incentivized by something and externally incentivized by something. So for some people who are more of a saver minded person, that means that they are internally motivated to save because the act of saving is motivating to them. The
Hmm.
more money they have in their bank account, the better they feel. So they're like, what's the problem? We want to save. Like, why are you not motivated to put money into savings? Well, that's because they have an internal motivation to save for the sake of saving.
Hmm.
And that is not any better than being externally motivated by savings. So, what externally motivated means is I'm achieving this goal. And when I achieve this goal, I get this extra reward. I get this external reward. So, what that would look like for someone is like going to your spouse and saying, hey, you know how you've been talking about my husband's big into music. You know how you've been talking about that guitar for a really long time? We currently have less than $1,000 in savings. If we build our savings up to 5,000, we can buy that guitar. Like
Hmm.
after we get 5,000 in the savings, I'm gonna print a picture of that guitar you've been talking about. I'm gonna put it on the fridge with a little thermometer that we're gonna color. And when our savings account has $5,000 in it, I want you to buy that guitar. That's
Hmm.
a totally 180 conversation for that person who goes from no way, I don't want to talk about a budget to oh, the thing that I thought I couldn't buy, I can now buy. So those are the two big things is if you're facing that frustration with a spouse, pause and reflect on yourself and what you've tried so far and ask yourself if you have given them independence and incentive, which
Hmm.
incentive is not your incentive, it's their incentive, if those two things have been present in your plan so far.
I'm totally externally motivated, and my husband is internally
Mm-hmm.
motivated. And it wasn't until we decided to adopt that I really cared about our money because I was like, I have this goal of bringing our son home. Like before that, it was retirement, whatever, paying off our mortgage, like, woohoo, who cares, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now I had this goal, and it was paramount. Like it was like just this huge mindset shift of like I am motivated by short-term goals, by exactly what you said, and I see that now even like with travel. Like okay, if we do this, if we don't spend here, then we get to go on a vacation. That's totally how I'm
Mm-hmm.
motivated. Whereas he's just more like, yay, there's money in the bank,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm
Yes.
happy to do that.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm like, who cares?
Yep. Yep, exactly. Yep. And both of them, I think the thing we can do is sometimes put some sort of like moral high ground on the one that's internally motivated and say,
Mm,
oh, wow, they're better with money. It's not that way. It's just different. It's just a different wiring because that person is actually going to struggle to enjoy their money. They're going to
mm,
struggle to spend it in a way that is that enjoys and brings like true meaning out of what they're
mm.
doing. There are going to be struggles for the internally motivated person that the externally motivated person doesn't have, and vice versa. So they're on equal planes and they're just different. They're not that like, oh, he manages money better than I do. If you spend money better than he does, then you're actually on equal planes and just have a different set of skills.
So eye-opening. I think that people are probably driving around listening to this, like having so many aha moments. This is
Yep.
so good. Okay. I would love to keep chatting, but we got to get to rapid fire for you. And so here's a question I have. Number one, budget category that always surprises people with how much it adds up. Mine is miscellaneous.
Transportation.
What did you say?
Yes.
Transportation? Ooh.
Transportation. Yep. So a lot of time, if we add together like car payments, gas, car insurance, and then
Mhm.
anything related to maintenance, I think sometimes we think of those things as really separate things. Like our car payment is totally different than like our insurance and our gas and stuff. When we put those together, a lot of times I like when I build a budget and I see a really high transportation, which is like if more than 10% of your take home pay is going to transportation, that's high because we need a lot of it for a lot of other things. We need about 30% just for our housing and utilities. We need 15 to 20% for our food. And it just whittles down from there. And so a lot of times I have to kind of tell people, you're driving around your paycheck, you're driving around your dollars. And so if we can have a little bit less of your money going to a car that can get you from A to B, because there's a lot of other cars that could also get you from A to B, we can free up a lot of space for things that you are wanting to do.
Well, now I got to go look at my transportation budget. I'm like,
See if you're under 10%.
Okay, I'm gonna go look that up. Okay. What is a money mistake that you've made and what did it teach you? I think sometimes people that think like people that
Mhm.
teach money just have it all figured out. But my guess is by same with me, I
No.
didn't learn how to simplify because I've always simplified, right? So
Yep.
share with us.
Yeah. So two things. I am a spender. So there are constantly small purchases that I regret, and I realize how impulsive I am. And then number two, in the process of like paying our debt and saving up money and all those things, I wish I would have paused and slowed down to enjoy it a little more. I was so aggressive with paying off some of those goals that I really tried to say any spending is bad and I need to not do that at all. So I wish I would have even like a 5% softening in what our goals were to slow down and not be so laser focused on I can't enjoy anything until I get to this benchmark.
That's really good. That's good because it's like that tension of being present, but then also being goal minded.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I struggle with, right? Like being here in the now, but also like the not yet. Yes, so good. Okay.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit, Carly, about where they can find you, what services you offer, where's your podcast. Of course, we'll put everything in the show notes, but you kind of mentioned how you help people start a budget, which if that's something that you struggle with, maybe bringing in a third party is super helpful. We did that with our with our long-term finances, and it's been so
Mm-hmm.
helpful to take the pressure off of Scott and I and put it on a third party, and now we're on a team.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like a triangular thing. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so debtfree.mom is my Instagram. That's primarily where I am. And then I have the Debt Free Mom podcast, which wherever you're listening to this podcast, if you search Debt Free Mom, you'll find me. And then I have everything in all ranges of prices because I know I'm working with people who are struggling with their money. So I have free templates to download. I primarily operate with budgeting by pay period as opposed to by month. And so I have a free template to do that. I have a $9 one that comes with some tutorial videos. And then I also offer one-on-one services where, just like you said, I can be that third party to help set up a budget that not only looks good with the numbers, but also we can adjust it to prioritize those goals and make sure that we're doing those small tweaks, consistent changes over time to get to where they want to be in a way that's sustainable. And so those are called custom budgets where we can work together to build a budget for that family. And I have everything in between to help with consistent meals that are easy, that don't take a lot of time, and just managing that money in a way that feels life giving instead of taking away from things.
If I could just give a plug to accountability and inviting people in to help you, you will find you are so much more successful. We have done that. And so I dubbed 2024 the year of accountability, where I just invited people in from my health to counseling to business. And let me tell you what I have learned is that is money well spent. There is definitely a return on your investment in inviting somebody like an expert, just that accountability, because there are going to be days where it's hard and you want to give up. And having that person to be like, no, we keep going, we keep tweaking is so invaluable. So I love that you offer that service because I think that's so important, especially if you just feel defeated or like, I just don't know where to start. I love that.
Yeah. And I love being able to be someone that is otherwise unknown because that's a lot of like money
Mm,
comes with so much emotional baggage.
mm.
So I love being able to step into that issue that someone's having and be like, you don't know me from Adam. I don't know your family. I don't know your friends. You don't have to ever talk to me again after we build this budget, but we can be really frank and honest in this conversation because you don't need to have that
Mm,
emotional weight of like, oh, I'm really embarrassed about this debt.
mm,
Like I've built thousands of budgets. I'm going to build thousands more after you. And in the best way possible, I'm going to forget whatever your numbers were tomorrow. So we
mm.
can just lay it all out on the table and have someone, you don't have to tiptoe around any topics related to your money. We can just work together to build that best plan for you. And I can bring that objective, outside, compassionate perspective into it.
I feel like the tiny tweak here is sometimes you just have to flex your fear muscle. I always say there's good on the other side of brave. So maybe what if you're
Mm.
listening today and you're like, "Oh, maybe this is the tweak you need," because as we said, awareness is your superpower, ignorance is not bliss, and we want you to not just survive this life but thrive. And one of the ways you can do that is to get a handle on your finances. Well, Carly, this was incredible. Seriously, I learned so much. I'm going to go back and look at my budget, have conversations with my husband. So thank you so much for doing what you do. We will put all the information, like she said, in our show notes, but at debtfree.mom on Instagram, that's a great place to connect with her. Carly, this was a delight. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks, Erin.
If you liked this episode, it would mean so much if you'd share it with a friend or leave a quick rating and review so others can find our show. Until next time, you can find me at Simple Purposeful Living on Instagram and Facebook.